Caitlin Clark has landed her first speaking gig of the offseason.
Caitlin Clark secured her first off-season speaking engagement. The WNBA is now in a total panic as reports have emerged leaking Caitlin Clark's latest off-season contract. The details are completely shocking. The rookie sensation, a constant in headlines this year, has reportedly landed a private deal valued at more than what many veteran players earn in a full season. From historic ticket sales to stunning sponsorships, everything she does becomes a viral sensation. But this recent contract, it has insiders murmuring, executives scrambling, and players raging in private. If the online leaks are accurate, it completely alters the future of the WNBA. It reveals the true extent of Caitlin Clark's power and the league's response. That is where the actual stories start. It all began with one tweet, which spread uncontrollably on social media within an hour. A sports insider alleged that Caitlin Clark secretly signed a new off-season agreement with a reported value in the six figures. This deal wasn't with the WNBA or a team sponsor, but a major private entity for an exclusive series of appearances. Initially, fans believed it was a prank. Soon after, screenshots of internal event memos surfaced, confirming Caitlin would be the main speaker for a high-profile speaking engagement in New York under a contract rumored to exceed $100,000 per session. That was the moment the whole league began to lose its composure. The WNBA, already healing from months of public criticism, was abruptly thrust back into the spotlight. Reports claim executives were caught off guard by the leak. There was no official statement. However, insiders revealed that calls were instantly made between the commissioner's office and major marketing partners. Their anger wasn't about Caitlin securing another deal. They were enraged that it leaked before they could manage the narrative. This was more than just an endorsement. It was a declaration of independence.
The biggest conversations last offseason was Caitlin Clark $100,000 an hour speaking gigs. Well, I'm here to tell you she is not taking long getting back to work, raking in the cash because she has landed yet her first speaking gig. Now, I don't know if the money is still $100,000. That has yet to come out, how much Caitlin Clark is charging this go around, but I'm pretty sure it's probably the same.
Caitlin Clark's power had grown to a level that few thought a rookie could achieve. The majority of players spend the offseason working hard overseas or seeking minor brand deals. Caitlin, conversely, was securing high-level corporate contracts valued at more than the combined league minimum salary. This type of earning potential disrupts the WNBA's entire structure. Suddenly, discussions on fairness, exposure, and player equality were sparked again. With Caitlin at the center, fans began to pose difficult questions. Why do some players make pennies compared to Caitlin's earnings in one day? Why isn't the league doing more to elevate the financial standard for all players? These questions were not well received by league officials or by certain veterans who had long campaigned for better pay without ever achieving Caitlin's level of commercial success. Within a few hours of the leak, social media was awash with a mix of praise and resentment. Some hailed her as a pioneer, revolutionizing women's sports. Others claimed she was eclipsing her colleagues and prioritizing fame over teamwork. Behind the scenes, officials in the league reportedly discussed if her deal might breach specific off-season promotional rules. Sources indicated talks were underway about whether Caitlin should have notified the WNBA before signing such a significant contract. Yet, these same insiders privately conceded the league had no genuine control. Caitlin was not violating any rules. She was just succeeding in a realm the WNBA never thought someone could access this early. By day's end, her leaked agreement had generated more online discussion than the actual finals series. It was a harsh reminder that Caitlin Clark doesn't require the league's approval to seize the spotlight, and for WNBA executives observing the chaos, one thing was certain: if they are unable to contain her, they must devise a way to keep pace, because the next phase of this drama was about to affect their most vulnerable area, public perception.
Now, I know a lot of people have been wondering why come she didn't do Unrivaled. Guys, Caitlin Clark really didn't need the money to do Unrivaled. She's landing $100K to speak to speak for companies and represent companies all over the country. She's not hurting for cash, and I just think this is just the coolest thing ever that Caitlin Clark is able to do this.
When the story broke, the WNBA's official response was silence, but within league offices, panic was spreading quickly. Insiders say executives were rushing to understand how a rookie had outplayed their whole media operation. Caitlin Clark's new off-season contract didn't just highlight her market worth, it revealed how little authority the league possessed over its top star. The instant those contract specifics leaked, everything from sponsorship plans to media stories descended into turmoil. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert allegedly held urgent calls with her communications team. The issue wasn't just the money, it was the optics. How could the league defend its stringent salary caps when a single player was making more in 1 week than most teammates earn in a year? It exposed a significant issue. The WNBA had cultivated its brand around unity and equality. However, Caitlin's financial triumphs demolished that image overnight. Fans were no longer discussing the finals. They were discussing Caitlin's earning. In private, several veteran players were reportedly furious. Some felt betrayed, while others were embarrassed. They had campaigned for years to increase player salaries, only to see a rookie come in and exceed them without needing the league's consent. Social media intensified this frustration. Tweets and posts from unverified player accounts hinted at resentment, implying that some stars receive preferential treatment. Although no one mentioned Caitlin directly, the target was clear. But what truly concerned the WNBA wasn't envy, it was the understanding that they could not manage the story. Caitlin Clark had created a brand so strong that not even league executives could control how her story was presented. Every single news outlet, podcast, and YouTube channel was covering her contract, and none were waiting for an official press release. ESPN segments, influencer commentary, and fan discussions were all creating their own versions of the truth. The league's silence just exacerbated the problem. Meanwhile, Caitlin's team remained composed and professional. They neither confirmed nor denied the deal, and they refused to engage in the chaos. This self-assurance unsettled the WNBA further. It was obvious Caitlin's team wasn't on the defensive. They were setting the pace. For the very first time, a player held the power to define her own offseason story. Away from the league's official messaging, the internal discussions reportedly became intense. Some executives argued they should leverage Caitlin's star power, regardless of the disruption. Others advocated for stricter rules, worried her success would divide locker rooms and alienate players who felt ignored. But one fact was clear: the league had never encountered a scenario like this. As the silence persisted, fans saw it as a sign of guilt, frustration, or a combination of both. The WNBA's greatest fear was realized. Its image was no longer under its control, and if Caitlin Clark's influence continued to grow without restraint, the power dynamic between players and the league might be permanently altered.
It looked like Caitlin Clark is headed to Long Island Association, bro. So it stated Long Island Association joined the Long Island Association's president and CEO, Matt Cohen, moderates a special conversation with Caitlin Clark discussing her record-breaking performances, impact, and cultural influence on October the 29th at 10:30 to 12:30 in New York. And there it is, man. Caitlin Clark, networking reception, Chris Holly Country Club. So this is at a golf course. But yeah, guys, so Caitlin Clark has landed her first speaking gig of the off season, and shout out to CC, bro. One thing about Caitlin, dog, she gonna get to that bag.
The moment Caitlin Clark's contract leak went viral, the entire league's atmosphere changed. What was expected to be a peaceful offseason erupted into a tempest of jealousy, rumors, and frustration. Players who had previously supported her started to wonder if the WNBA's new star was getting too much too fast. Locker rooms that had once welcomed her presence were now thick with tension, as teammates and opponents tried to understand how one rookie became a global brand so quickly. Some veterans felt betrayed. It wasn't because of Caitlin's success, but because her success underscored a harsh reality. They had struggled for years in obscurity, playing overseas just to get by. And yet, Caitlin was making six figures from a single appearance without even playing. For players who had advocated for salary increases, it felt like a personal insult. "We laid the groundwork, and she's walking on marble," one insider quoted a bitter player as saying. Social media amplified the issue. Every post about Caitlin's contract became a viral hit, while highlights from the championship games struggled for attention. Fans filled comment sections with comparisons to WNBA veterans, calling her the definitive face of women's basketball and dismissing others as irrelevant. The animosity was about more than just money, it was about the spotlight. Caitlyn's celebrity had overshadowed the league's collective identity. Instead of honoring team victories, every discussion seemed to revolve around one person, Caitlin Clark. A couple of players made public attempts to show their support. Wnba Wilson offered a brief congratulations to Caitlin on social media, but fans quickly analyzed the tone, questioning its sincerity. Others chose to say nothing at all. Behind the scenes, insiders noted growing divisions within teams, between those who supported Caitlin's positive impact on league visibility and those who felt she was diminishing years of hard work by others. The gap was growing, and it was palpable.
You know, I know a lot of people been feeling the type of way about her not standing up for herself, her, just being so nonchalant with things. But one thing I can vividly tell you guys is that Caitlin Clark is going to get to that bag. She ain't going to lose no money at all, bruh. I can almost promise you that.
Meanwhile, Caitlin herself was silent. No social media posts, no press conferences, no remarks. That silence just added to the speculation. Was she ignoring the criticism or deliberately avoiding it? Her team reportedly concluded that no response was the best response, hoping the controversy would fade on its own, but it persisted. Each day brought fresh debates on sports shows about whether Caitlin's impact was beneficial or detrimental to the WNBA. Some contended she was single-handedly elevating the sport. Others accused her of hogging the limelight at the expense of her colleagues. The league's marketing department attempted to shift focus by promoting team-based content, but it was ineffective. Every fan debate inevitably returned to Caitlin's contract. The jealousy wasn't diminishing, it was intensifying. In private, team dynamics were shifting. Coaches were discreetly telling players to stay focused on their own paths, but that was easier said than done. Caitlin Clark had transformed the entire landscape, and not everyone was equipped to handle it. The tension was palpable, the rumors were spreading, and it was only a matter of time before someone from the league would speak out publicly. And at that point, the situation would truly detonate. When the news of Caitlin Clark's leaked off-season contract became a major story, the media sensed an opportunity. Every platform, from ESPN to independent sports blogs, descended on it like a feeding frenzy. Headlines blared about her six-figure speaking fee, pundits discussed her expanding influence, and talk shows made it the biggest story of the week. In just hours, the Caitlin Clark contract leak was a top national trend. The WNBA's strategy of silence was no longer viable. The narrative was completely beyond their grasp. ESPN commentators tried to be cautious, describing it as a reflection of her market worth, but the harm was already done. Every segment mentioning Caitlin was inundated with fan comments accusing the network of being hypocritical. These were the very same analysts who had previously wondered if she was receiving too much hype. Now they had to concede that her brand's power was undeniable. The public noticed the change and called them out for attempting to alter the narrative on the fly. Behind the scenes, the league's PR team worked frantically to craft statements to quell the uproar. They aimed to emphasize the positive aspects, how Caitlin's success benefited women's sports, signaled increasing visibility, and showed that the WNBA was connecting with new audiences. But every version sounded defensive. Executives worried that directly addressing her deal would confirm the rumors, so they opted for a long-term strategy, filling official social media with generic content about league solidarity and team successes. It was unsuccessful, the media wasn't convinced, and neither were the fans. Sports podcasts started producing in-depth analyses of the WNBA's history of financial difficulties and restricted player independence. Commentators highlighted how Caitlin's individual success revealed the league's antiquated marketing model. They questioned why it required one player, just out of college, to elevate women's basketball to a national topic. Some went further, accusing the WNBA of envy and internal sabotage, implying that the commissioner's silence was not due to professionalism but to fear. In the meantime, Caitlin's deal continued to build momentum. Her New York event sold out in less than 2 days. Corporations began vying to partner with her, and her name was at the top of every trend list related to women's sport. The more the league tried to ignore it, the more the media focused on it. It had turned into a struggle for narrative control, Caitlin's personal brand against the WNBA's official image. At one point, an ESPN analyst inadvertently revealed on air that the network was instructed to reduce coverage of the leak to safeguard the league's reputation. That one remark set off another wave of online fury as fans accused the WNBA of manipulating the media. What was intended to quell the situation only added fuel to the fire. By week's end, one thing was impossible to ignore. Caitlin Clark was no longer just a player, she was a phenomenon. And for a league fighting to control its own story, that level of power was more intimidating than any rival on the court. As the media frenzy continued, Caitlin Clark remained perfectly silent. That silence itself became a major story. No tweets, no press events, no official comments from her team. Only a quiet self-assurance. While the WNBA hurried to manage the narrative, Caitlin's composed demeanor conveyed a powerful message. She owed no one a justification, and that, above all, frustrated the league. Each time reporters requested a comment, they were met with courteous refusals or complete silence. Instead of fading, the speculation intensified. Fans began to see her silence as a sign of strength, proof that she was functioning at a level beyond the league's influence. Journalists hailed her as the first WNBA player to operate on her own terms, and even past players started to acknowledge that Caitlin was changing the definition of a professional female basketball player. Meanwhile, sponsors were thrilled. Brands viewed the situation as an opportunity, not a crisis. Her silence created an aura of mystery, and that mystery made her more marketable. Companies started vying to book her for exclusive appearances, interviews, and endorsements. Every action Caitlin took, from attending a charity fundraiser to practicing in a local gym, was chronicled by fans and bloggers. She wasn't merely trending, she was commanding the entire dialogue around women's sports. Inside WNBA headquarters, the quiet was deafening. Executives considered whether to publicly endorse her or to wait for the situation to resolve itself. Some insiders advocated for a congratulatory message, believing that celebrating Caitlin's success would project unity, but others cautioned that it might portray the league as weak, as if it were submitting to a single player. The longer Caitlin remained silent, the more divided the league seemed. Behind the scenes, a few veteran players made private inquiries, trying to understand her perspective. They wanted to know if Caitlin was creating distance from the WNBA or just letting the controversy pass. Reports indicate she answered politely but decisively, stating she was concentrating on her off-season commitments and had no interest in the drama. It was a mature response that stood in stark contrast to the turmoil surrounding her. Her choice to let the storm continue without engaging became a brilliant lesson in brand management. Every report about her leaked contract only boosted her profile. She had no need to respond or offer explanations. The public was handling the conversation for her. Even those who had once called her overhyped started to concede that she was operating at a different level. The WNBA's panic seemed increasingly insignificant in comparison. The more they attempted to minimize the issue, the more impactful Caitlin's silence became. It wasn't pride, it was a calculated move. She understood her value and refused to let the distractions undermine it. But as her fame continued to grow without any checks, league insiders started to ask what occurs when a single player becomes more prominent than the league itself. The answer was on its way, and it was not going to be pleasant. By the time the week concluded, it was evident that a fundamental shift had occurred within the WNBA. Caitlin Clark's leaked contract did more than reveal figures, it revealed power. For the first time in the league's history, the center of influence had moved from the commissioner's office to an individual player. Every headline, every social media trend, and every sponsorship discussion centered on her. Caitlin had inadvertently achieved what no executive had managed to do. She brought women's basketball into the mainstream, but this success brought consequences the league was not ready for. Behind the scenes, high-level meetings were reportedly convened to address long-term plans. Insiders noted anxious tones and defensive postures. Executives were grappling with questions they had never encountered. What is the protocol when a player outgrows the brand? How can you promote a league when one person's fame overshadows every team, every story, and every sponsor? There were no simple solutions, just a quiet sense of dread. Some league officials proposed the idea of reorganizing media access to limit the amount of coverage focused exclusively on Caitlin. Others contended that reducing her visibility would be a disastrous move. "You can't block out the sun," a marketing consultant reportedly stated during a tense discussion. The reality was that Caitlin's fame wasn't due to special treatment. It was a convergence of skill, timing, and charisma. Fans felt a connection to her that they hadn't with any previous player. She wasn't merely the star of a team, she was the compelling story that sustained the league. This realization prompted some difficult self-reflection. If Caitlyn could command a six-figure fee for one event without the WNBA's help, what did that reveal about the league's capacity to support its athletes? Sponsors started to wonder where to best allocate their marketing funds, to the league as a whole or directly to Caitlyn's personal brand. That question alone sent shockwaves through the executive offices. The WNBA found itself suddenly in competition with its own player for public attention. At the same time, fan allegiances began to change. People who had never seen a WNBA game were now following Caitlyn's career with intense interest. Her contract leak had unintentionally made her a symbol of empowerment, someone who didn't need approval to achieve greatness. On social media, hashtags like Caitlyn Era and ACC Power Move started to trend. What was initially an embarrassing leak had transformed into a call to action for fans demanding change. Even players who were initially resentful started to see the broader implications. A few privately conceded that Caitlyn's success could ultimately benefit everyone if her deals demonstrated the financial potential in women's basketball. Perhaps the league would finally feel compelled to increase salaries and create more opportunities. However, not everyone was optimistic. Some worried that Caitlyn's expanding influence would further fragment the WNBA, creating a hierarchy of stars and role players. Regardless of individual opinions, one fact was undeniable: Caitlyn Clark had permanently altered the power structure. The WNBA was no longer directing her narrative. She was now directing theirs, and the league's operations would be forever changed. As Caitlyn Clark's fame continued to grow, the WNBA leadership was under increasing pressure to take action. The longer their silence continued, the more the public perceived the league as insecure and fractured. Rumors started to spread that officials were thinking about new rules to oversee off-season contracts and sponsorship agreements, a poorly disguised effort to regain control after losing the narrative. But the fans were not deceived. The league's attempt to slow Caitlyn's rise only provoked a stronger negative reaction. Social media was filled with criticism. Pundits accused the WNBA of being envious, while fans charged executives with hypocrisy. "You ought to be celebrating her, not controlling her," one widely shared post stated. Others noted that male athletes are praised for monetizing their fame, yet when Caitlyn did it, it was suddenly a problem. The discussion quickly became contentious. Every online conversation devolved into a clash between those who supported Caitlyn's right to capitalize on her fame and those who claimed she was upsetting the league's equilibrium. ESPN and other sports channels attempted to present it as a developmental phase for women's basketball, but in private there was panic. Sponsors were calling every day asking if future agreements with Caitlyn would be subject to league review. Corporate partners were not interested in dealing with new regulations. They wanted the star power she provided. This dilemma left the WNBA's leadership caught between preserving their existing system and risking the loss of their most important asset. Meanwhile, Caitlyn maintained a perfect image of composure. Her team was quiet and her fame only grew. The leaked contract, which had first sparked turmoil, had now made her a symbol of empowerment in women's sport. For many, she embodied the idea that players could finally manage their own brands without waiting for the league's blessing. This was terrifying for executives who had always used centralized control to shape public perception. In the following weeks, a subtle media battle ensued. Insiders friendly to the league began to leak stories suggesting Caitlyn's celebrity was causing tension in the locker room. They hinted that her presence might be a distraction from team chemistry, but the fans were not convinced. Instead of turning on Caitlyn, they turned on the WNBA. Hashtags like Devs Let Caitlyn Cook and Support CC filled social media, ridiculing the league's supposed efforts to diminish her impact. The more they tried to restrain her, the larger her fan base became. By the time her speaking engagement in New York took place, the event was completely sold out and it received widespread coverage. Caitlyn entered the stage as if she commanded the moment, confident, composed, and unaffected by the controversy surrounding her. Cameras flashed, the audience cheered, and every major news outlet provided live coverage. At that instant, it was perfectly clear Caitlyn Clark was no longer just a player, she was a phenomenon. The WNBA could attempt to spin it, ignore it, or control it, but the change in power was irreversible. The league was not writing her story anymore, she was writing theirs, and it was a permanent shift. October 29th arrived, the day of Caitlin Clark's much-awaited speaking event in New York. Every seat had been sold for weeks, and the space was filled with executives, athletes, business leaders, and fans who came from all over just to hear her. Outside, media trucks crowded the streets as reporters gave live updates, as if it were a major championship. What was intended as a simple corporate function had turned into a major event, a moment that made even WNBA leaders understand the true scale of Caitlin's influence. When she finally appeared on stage, the entire audience rose. Cameras flashed, and applause filled the room. For a brief period, all the controversy around her disappeared. Caitlin wasn't there as an athlete representing the league. She was there as her own entity. Her demeanor showed the quiet confidence of someone who had seized control of her own path, and that fact struck the WNBA more profoundly than any news report ever could. Her speech wasn't about the controversy or her contract. It was about development, leadership, and maintaining focus in difficult times. But between the lines, everyone in the audience understood the underlying message. She didn't need the league to validate her work. By the end, even those who had previously dismissed her as overhyped were applauding. The standing ovation continued for several minutes. Sponsors quickly shared photos, news outlets published positive reviews, and social media was flooded with clips from her speech. Caitlin Clark just demonstrated why she is more than just a basketball player. One post declared, "Back at the WNBA headquarters, the mood was somber. Executives watched on live feeds, knowing they had thoroughly lost the public relations fight. Instead of creating a scandal, Caitlin had transformed her situation into a moment of empowerment. Her silence, her composure, and her poise had completely changed the narrative. She was no longer just the league's top star, she was its de facto ambassador, and the WNBA, like it or not, now orbited her. Players who had once been envious began to see new possibilities. A few started to pursue their own brand deals, following Caitlin's example. Younger players praised her as a pioneer for showing that female basketball players could be both athletes and businesswomen. Even some coaches privately acknowledged that her independent success had elevated the sport in ways no official marketing effort ever had. But for the league's leadership, the success felt bittersweet. They knew a new era had started, one in which the players held the power. Caitlin Clark had changed the rules without uttering a single word, and the entire sports industry was paying attention. As she exited the stage, smiling and acknowledging her fans, it was not merely the conclusion of an event, it was the start of something much larger. The WNBA had a choice: adapt to her new paradigm or be left in the dust. And given the rapid pace of change surrounding Caitlin Clark, their time was quickly expiring. Caitlin Clark's leaked off-season contract did more than just create news, it altered the power dynamics in the WNBA. What began as a rumor grew into a movement, revealing how a single player's influence could transform an entire league. Her silence, confidence, and composure turned a potential scandal into a powerful display of dominance. The WNBA attempted to manage the situation, but instead, it only highlighted how unstoppable Caitlin's rise has become. She demonstrated that athletes no longer require approval to find success, and that they can forge their own paths outside the established system. For fans, it was empowering. For executives, it was alarming. And for women's basketball, it was a landmark moment, because after this, things will never be the same. Caitlin Clark is no longer just the face of the WNBA. She is the driving force that is shaping its future, one headline and one contract at a time.